time to take a look at his main line in the Nimzo-Larsen, and that is this variation in which black defends the e5 pawn with pawn to f6. So against this, we're going to immediately play knight to c3 again, threatening this in the center. Most likely you will see the move knight to e7. Sometimes you could also see this move bishop to e6. So let's say knight to e7. You can take here in the center. They will take back, and then there is queen h5 check. And queen h5 check is always a good move in these variations because you are both giving a check, also threatening the center. You are kind of forcing them to play this move g6, which is of course a weakening move, and then you can just drop back with the queen to h4. And here we have many tricks because our queen will be on h4. If your opponent wants to avoid this, they can always capture here with the bishop. That is possible, but this is also not such a good line for black because of d4 and then again queen h5, and you can go back to f3, and as you can see this pawn is weak. For example, after castles, takes, and then you will have this free pawn. So usually they will be forced to go for this variation with pawn takes and then having your queen drop back here to h4. A most played move here is something like castles by black, and then you can actually play castling with white as well, the long castle, and we will have a devastating kingside attack in this variation. So something like a6 is the most played move, and we don't want to capture. We're going to use our bishop as an attacker here on this side of the board, so we just drop back. b5, of course, black is trying to attack our queen side since we are trying to attack them on the king side, but we will be way quicker. Other options are also possible for black. For example, if they play bishop e6, there is knight f3, knight f5, and knight f5 is such a common move. You will get this so often. If you get this, you will also always have takes, and then, for example, a move like knight g5, challenging this bishop and then winning this pawn in the center. Sometimes you will also get knight f5 immediately in this position after you drop the queen back. So for example here, after you drop the queen back, you will get something like knight h5, but again, you can just capture and then win this pawn here as well. And sometimes even a little bit earlier, for example here, you might get something like knight f5 as well. And always the same idea, you can capture and then just capture this. But usually they will do this after they have castled, of course, because they don't want to lose their right to castle. So this is the main variation where they go for this b5 push, and here we will develop our knight to h3. And the plan is just simply to go knight to g5 and then go for these checkmates. And basically these checkmates are really hard to avoid from the black side. For example, a move like b4, and you can just let them do this. It doesn't matter, we are immediately going to go for checkmate here. So of course they cannot capture us, otherwise this would be a checkmate. So this is just a checkmate in one if they capture your knight. So they will have to do something else. Yeah, it's hard to find the defense really. The best defense is actually this move h5. But again, this is losing because we grab this pawn for free as well. You would say, well, of course it's defended, but that doesn't really matter because you can capture this, and then of course we have this devastating attack here with the bishop pinning the knight. If they go back to protect their knight, which is a common move, you can play rook here because we're going to push this pawn and we're going to break this open and go for the checkmate. For example, a move like c6, g4, and yeah, g4 we are trying to break this open. Of course they can always capture this with the bishop, but we don't care, we just play rook takes g4, and of course capturing this leads to checkmate. So they can't really capture this with their bishop either. What else can they do? If they capture with the pawn, this is also a checkmate. If they just ignore it and play something like a5, there is pawn takes. Again, you don't really want to capture here because this leads to a checkmate in 6 and every single variation. This, for example, is already a checkmate in 1. If they try to defend here, you actually have knight e6, and this is a check like this, and then, for example, knight here, rook takes, bishop takes, and this is also a checkmate. If they go for knight here and then rook takes, they can always try to run with the king, but you have queen takes. Yeah, and this is just terrible. For example, king here, knight g7 check, king e7, and then queen checkmate. So this is checkmate in almost every single variation. So it's hard to do anything for black. So capturing this is not smart. They might try to do something like knight here to challenge your queen. Well, you can just move the queen back. We still have an amazing attack here with all of our pieces present. For example, in this variation, you can draw out the enemy king, you can move the knight, activate this rook, take here with the bishop. You just have amazing checkmating patterns in every single line. And for example, after king there, rook takes, rook doubling, and this is just unavoidable checkmate in every single line. So this is basically the main line. This is the best variation for black to play, which is this early pawn to f6. But as I just showed you, our plan is to just keep going for attacks, keep playing for tricks, and go for a full attack on the enemy king side. What to do if black goes for an Indian setup against your Nimzo-Larsen attack? So for example, f6 and then g6. What to do in this variation? Well, you can play e3, which is your main plan, and then you can play d4. And we will have a different approach, of course, against the Indian setup than we would have against other variations. So we're going to play a little bit more strategic, like this. The main idea, simple moves, knight f3, develop your bishop, and just play simple moves, castle, play c4. And this is the whole idea with white in this position. You don't have crazy attacking chances right from the start, but you can just have a beautiful setup like this. Strong pawns, good bishops, your knights will develop to beautiful squares. There are many variations here for black, and I want to actually take a look at two of them. Rook e8 we will take a look at, and also c5. So if they play c5 early on, which is actually the most played move in this variation, you will play c4. If they capture, you can capture back, and again, this is a really strong center from white. Probably something like this from black, knight c3, and then you can always shut down the center like this to eliminate black's play. Knight c5 you will get most of the time. You can play b4 just to kick it back. If they come in, you can just trade it, trade this. Many players go for queen d4 here, but that's not the best move. It's actually better to play something like queen here, since the knight has to go back anyways, or they have to play this, which is also terribly weakening. So let's say the knight goes back, you can go knight here, rook e8, rook here. And the main idea is just to see that this is a really good position for white, since we have all of these central pieces. We are the ones with space, we are the ones with developed pieces, we are the ones with plans. And just simply a position like this is something you might reach, and this will be more of a strategic battle. Of course, they don't have to go for early c5, they can also go for something like rook e8, trying to go for this push. You can just play c4. If they go for this push, you can take, and here you can actually take with the knight. And this is a mistake that many players with the black pieces fall into. They play this Indian setup, and the most played variation in the Indian setup here is to or either play the c5 or to play rook e8 and then go for this move, e5, which is not so good because you can capture, and then they will capture you back, and you can just take with the knight. If they capture your knight, you take with the queen, and then you capture this knight, and you are just up a full pawn in this variation. And this is one of the most played lines in the Indian against the Nimzo-Larsen attack, which is to go for this early e5 push. Of course, if they play something else, something more safe, let's just say a move like this, you can still play for the same plans and go for a more strategic approach instead of playing for tactics. What to do with the Nimzo-Larsen attack? If your opponent plays the French defense, so for example, this French setup, well, you can still keep the same ideas as always, e3, and I actually love playing this move f4 against the French. Since they are not playing pawn to e5 early on, this allows us to go for this f4 push, gaining some space, and you can see we have incredible control over the center in this variation. Knight f3, bishop e2, we can call, so these are just simple moves, a simple system to remember with white. And here in these variations you can actually jump in with your knight to e5. Many players, actually most players, will capture you. You can capture back with the pawn and then play something like this to get a really strong and fortified center. Sometimes you might also see queen c7 trying to put some pressure here, but then you can just capture their knight and play d3, develop your knight, and you will also have a good game. But most of the time you will get this exchange, a variation like this with d4 and then this. And of course you can see we have a tremendously strong center here with white. If they try to break it, their best chance is a move like f6, knight here, capture, capture, and then something like this. For example, a check, king goes to the corner, and this position is where I will quit this variation. But I think you can already see this is pretty good for white. We have a strong center. What is this bishop doing here? This king is a little bit exposed. We have good pieces. We also have chances in the future, of course, for attacks down this kingside as well, and we can activate this rook. So really nothing to fear here from white.